All right, everybody, we're here with Maria. Maria was the country manager slash GM of Branch Nigeria. Before that, she was the GM of Uber Nigeria. So she has a lot of experience in tech in Nigeria, obviously. So we thought we'd bring her on the show just to talk about what she's learning and what she's up to now. Maria, where are you?
I'm currently at Oxford and the weather is good today. So I'm here with my husband as well, and we had to quarantine for 2 weeks. Although we did take a test before we left, but that doesn't count. Stay indoors for 2 weeks, which is pretty strict, actually. Like you can't go out of your house.
Wow.
So we had to order food, but our apartment overlooks this, like garden allotments, which is actually nice because we saw people coming.
Wow. You're just watching people for 2
well,
weeks.
At some point, it's like, when can we go out?
Have you tried punting?
I haven't. I almost did, but then the weather was horrible that day. No, but I will. I have to. I feel like it's an Oxford thing. Everyone talks about punting. You have to do it.
What is that? I actually don't even know what that is, except for football.
Maria, you want to explain it?
What I understand, it is pretty much like a boat, and then all of you like riding the boat all together. That's
right. And you have a stick. It's not an oar. And because there are a bunch of canals around Oxford, you're pushing along the bottom with a stick. And you can, have a few people in the boat and kind of go along the canals, and it's lovely. Yeah, so you got to check it. You got to do that. I mean, if unless crew is kind of more your thing.
No, I have to do it. I feel like I have to do it.
So I was hoping you could background. I think you just have a fascinating story.
Former management consultant, did that at Deloitte for 3 years. Strategy consulting was fascinating, was great. Worked with a lot of banks, did some operations improvement projects, but really wanted to get my hands dirty. Figured very early on that I was not a specialist, but a generalist specialist, and embraced it early on. So did consulting, loved it, but wanted to really go into entrepreneurship, like really get my hands dirty. And that was when I joined Uber as a country manager. So
how do you just like, I want to get my hands dirty. All of a sudden I'm country manager of a multi-billion-dollar company.
No.
Uber. How'd you make that leap?
Deloitte, I was a senior consultant, and I had already started like chatting to like the project managers, like the partners. I really wanted to do operations projects, and I had done some of that, but I was like, consulting will not, like operations and consulting, no matter how much you get your hands dirty, there's still that separation. And I think just a few months after I started, actively thinking about getting my hands dirty, Uber actually reached out. A recruiter reached out on LinkedIn.
Just randomly. That's fantastic.
It was so like serendipitous. And sometimes I'm like, to what extent, does that kind of change your entire life story? But someone from, Uber reached out, a recruiter said, we have this role open in Lagos. It's the operations manager role. So I didn't go in as a country manager, as the operations manager. And then I was like, yes, I'm excited about this. And did the interview, literally was like, I think 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And I had a job, and I had to resume at Uber a few months after. So I joined Uber, and it was literally like opposite of consulting, because in consulting, it's like, it's not done, it's perfect. And at a startup, it's like, done is better than perfect, like just get it going. And that was such a steep learning curve. But ironically, that was what helped me thrive in consulting, because I was very entrepreneurial. But this was at another level, and I'm so grateful for that experience, because what that did was just kind of almost like shift my brain towards this very aggressive bias towards action that has served me far. So I was at Uber for about 6 months, did mostly analytics, engaging with drivers, designing driver incentives as the operations manager. And then the GM left at the time. So it was like, who was going to assume there was a new role called the country manager role, because that person was the GM for West Africa. So there was a new role called the country manager, and it was like, okay, Maria, would you like to take this role? I was like, hells yeah, that's fun. But it was also a difficult time, because there was like price cuts, like Uber was facing so much in Nigeria. So it was like baptism by fire. Like many things were happening then. And I stayed there for a year in total. My role kind of pivoted to more like designing partnerships, like engaging with regulators, those type of stuff, alongside the policy person. But then just around a year.
I know, just sticking with Uber for a sec.
Yeah.
So I remember at that time there was sort of a battle with Taxify and Uber had some ups and downs
Mhm.
with, pricing, getting pricing right and getting the driver experience right. Where is it now? Are they surging again, or have they
Oh.
sort of given up on the country, or how's it going?
I mean, I'm not quite sure. But a few things have happened since then. I mean, there was the era where it was just Uber in the country, and then Taxify came in, and there was quite a lot of competition. Then there was COVID and what that did to that, business model.
There's
So
O-Ride too, right?
yeah,
O-Ride got big for a
but
second there.
but that's like the bikes, right?
Okay.
The Okadas, yes. So it's, I think at this point right now, it's pretty much just probably just running the business on autopilot, because you can't interact with drivers anymore because of COVID. Yeah, it's just, I think right now it's almost in like bare bones stage, just kind of like keeping that business going. But that's what I think.
Yeah. So we hired you. I forget how I first met you. Was it a recruiter, or how did we?
I think I think Andrew actually reached out to someone who worked with me at Uber before.
Right.
In Kenya, and then she made the referral, and she chatted me. She's like, hey, someone's, are you interested?
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't even know what branch was, but I knew Kiva and I knew, that story.
Okay.
So like, oh, okay. I'd love to know what branch was about that. And I think we met Matt in 2017, sometime then, somewhere in Lagos. And
Yeah, at Knock.
exactly at Knock. And I remember, coming to that meeting and then leaving and feeling so like energized, because I really connected to what you were trying to do. I really connected to the branch story. I felt like someone had to disrupt financial services the way Uber had disrupted transport. And from my consulting days with banking, I really wanted someone to do that. So yeah, that was how that happened after my time at Uber.
So you got thrown in the fire. We really were just starting to work in Nigeria. It wasn't going so well. How do you recall your 3 years
Yes,
at branch?
3 years.
Like from a business standpoint, what was the trajectory?
Oof.
Is it all smooth sailing?
No, definitely not. Like there were, I think it's just so fascinating thinking about it in retrospect, because it was almost like the business was at different phases at different times, and it required like different hats, different way to think about things. And I think that's where I kind of thrive, which is why it came so naturally to me. I was excited, even though it was, exhausting and stressful. It was the good kind that kind of energized you. So I remember the early days, it was pretty much us in a tiny little box somewhere in Lekki. That's the co-working
Yeah.
Senior Hub. And it was just a team of 3 people. And I remember, then it was kind of like just getting into the weekly, routines of, setting goals. I was new at the time. I inherited that small team. Was also getting, building their trust, in me as a leader, making sure we're aligned with the vision, which was aligned with the wider, branch vision. And I thought that was very important to invest time in that, in that stage, because, and I'm glad that now I did, in retrospect, because organically as we grew, that spirit just kind of multiplied. And it's very hard to kind of try to implement that at a larger stage, but really, having that culture inbred at the earlier stage, served us well in the long term. And I think it just made things more easy as we went. So there was that stage of being super small, just trying to grow the business, really aggressive growth, making sure the operations can kind of, withstand that growth. I've always believed that to build a scalable business, as you grow this way, your operations like metrics need to go this way, like your service times need to go down. And it's kind of like counterintuitive, because most people experiences of like scaling businesses is that it breaks as it goes. But I really do think that if you think about it and structure it early enough in a way that it can withstand scale, you can actually build magic. And that's one constant feedback we got from like branch. It's like, oh, they grew, but then their service times are still very, responsive, things didn't break as much. And I think that's the true beauty of really being able to build a business at scale. So there was that stage of like really aggressive growth. Then there was the bits where all I was doing was hiring. And like, it was like interviews and it's like
all day.
all day. And you can't, And you really need to kind of get people who get it, like who have that internal drive to want to do more, who connect to the vision, who are just natural self-starters, because it compounds. I really do think so. And I think that over time that was evident within the team.
Hey, Maria, how would you get at that? Like, I mean, if you're, going through this kind of every hour is interviewing different people, you're hiring for all sorts of open positions, like it's scaling, you're just trying to get, really great folks. Like, how do you do that well? Because people find themselves in that situation, and the outcomes can really, make or break the company from that phase of, adding, like doubling, tripling the team in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think in retrospect, a few things. I really do think it's just important to have a very solid like hiring team, like the people who
got it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you account for each other's like blind spots, because there might be things you would miss that someone else then kind of picks up on. And then another thing that I tried to do was also to just make the hiring process enjoyable for I am the person who I'm like talking to, because once they kind of loosen up, you get to know who they are, and you get better able to assess if they're a fit for the company, both from like a professional standpoint and even from like a life goals standpoint, like do they connect to what we're trying to build? So there were times where it was just like monotonous, but I think maybe also personality wise, I love to meet people. Like each new, experience with meeting someone, I see it as the universe presenting you with just another view of the world and, new information about people. So maybe that energy just kind of also helped. And then I also just used to tell myself it was for a period, you needed to build this really solid, middle and it wouldn't be as intense. So it wasn't forever.
Yeah. That's I love that everyone's kind of a point in the awareness, since you can almost enjoy
Exactly.
The experience of really getting to know folks. And it sounds like you kind of broadened it to just talk about life and other things in a way that was actually genuinely like enjoyable. And in the process, you're going to get a feel for how someone's going to do at Branch. Well, and how many folks did you hire in that time? Like, give us a sense of magnitude.
I think at the time I left, the team was around 39 or 40, and I had hired the team started when it was like 3. So minus that, so 36 people.
Boom.
Probably more than that. They didn't all stick around forever.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, plus or minus a few. But yeah.
Neat. And in terms of like the results, it wasn't always smooth sailing. We had some periods of fraud. We had some periods of difficult fundraising. We had default rate goes up and down. What do you think are the challenges of lending in Nigeria this way through a smartphone?
That's a good question. And now that you mentioned that, I just like had memories of all the difficult.
Sorry.
No, but it's so interesting how we kind of smoothing things in retrospect, because I didn't have that zoomed in my mind, but like, I remember one time we had this, case of fraud, and it wasn't.
How's that work?
Yeah, so pretty much, I mean, with the business model, we kind of use, smartphone data to credit score, and there's certain pointers we kind of look out for KYC validation, right? And on the other end, would I say on the BVN front, which is supposed to be the bank verification number, just for context, is pretty much, think of a social security number, but tied to your bank account. It's like a unique identity.
Oh, thank you. Making it relevant for Americans. Nice. That's very, very self-aware of you. Yeah.
So it's pretty much this amazing tool that I think really, I think it was very smart by the government to just pretty much tie every single Nigerian with a number that is linked to their bank account. So it just kind of does two things: validates that someone exists, and then also in the process validate that they have a bank account. So there were banks at the time who were trying to kind of like ramp up maybe their growth, and they had opened bank accounts for people using very low security like checks, so people could just use their BVN.
These are like, were they the 99 accounts, or weren't they all labeled with the same number?
Yes, there were some. Yeah, they were labeled with the same number. That was one way we were able to identify them. So with this,
like, here are the fraud accounts. These are accounts made for fraud. We're labeling them 99. Yeah, and then we just went through our database and like, yep. Everyone, every single person with this type of bank account is a criminal.
And the funny thing is, doing that, one thing that kind of came through quickly was that, you kind of saw quite a lot of those registrations of those numbers that in a particular period of time, you could tell that, something was wrong. And I think one thing about that incident that I found so fascinating was how quickly the team identified and responded to it. Shout out to Chike, who pretty much,
Chike is a hero. We got to get him on the podcast. We got to get him on the podcast. I'm gonna get his side of the story. I'm gonna get him next. Yeah.
Because he came to me, he's like, Maria, I think we noticed like a spike, and then we checked into it, and then we just started seeing the patterns. And maybe back to the story, these numbers were just numbers, bank accounts that banks had allowed people with BVNs create without being physically there. They had done it on their phone, and they didn't ask for any other level of like identification. So what happened was that some set of like bad actors just pretty much stole people's BVNs and then used that to create an account. And then
is there a place you can go in Ikeja to get BVNs, or where do people get these BVNs?
I have no idea, Matt. I'm not aware of that market, but it probably exists. I mean, if this was possible, it probably exists. Probably there's some data leakage somewhere.
On the dark web, there's a black market.
It is possible. So what happened then was we just had like an onslaught of these numbers and these accounts, and they applied for loans, and we disbursed loans into their accounts, but very quickly that they are not going to pay that back. So that was interesting because
I just so I can tie this, right? Yeah. So if these are stolen BVNs, then when we did our KYC, wouldn't we have basically required some kind of governmental form of identification, some kind of picture that basically matches the BVN number? And so how would they have, I guess, was that all fictionalized too, or how did they do that?
So the only reason they were able to do that was because there are checks that we have, and the checks are more, how would I put it? They're comprehensive to the extent that there's some degree of confidence that after we have done all these checks, the likelihood that this person owns this account is very high. And that incident was very helpful to us because there is, and this is interesting because there is something that we implemented from that incident that Paystack actually uses right now and is an API offering to other, to both us and other. We kind of really thought of that. And I think that's one unique thing about the model. It's kind of like with every incident, you can iterate to kind of, codify it back into the model to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And
it's like this arms race with the fraudsters. So I think that was like 2018.
Yes.
And we weren't very strong. We weren't, to your point, Premal, we weren't checking photos. There was a lot of things we weren't doing. We weren't doing similarity detection on phones, which really turned out to be the key. Yeah. So this kind of fraud is pretty hard to do, but it happened at scale, both in Kenya and Nigeria, all around the same time. So I feel like the fraudsters were sharing information, but essentially what they were doing was with a small set of phones, they were purchasing thousands of SIM cards. The SIM cards are like 20 cents each. So they're able to get a lot of them. And then they have some list of real identity numbers and real names. And then they would wipe the phones, the serial number of each phone, they would rewrite the serial number. Back then we were only checking the serial number of the phones. So it looked to our database like a new phone because it had a new serial number and it had a new phone number and it had a BVN with a name that matched.
Yeah.
The thing that really broke through, and Maria was a big part of making this happen, is we started checking the other contents of the phone, not just the serial number, and then comparing that with other phones in the database. And if they looked similar enough, we would just reject it, because it's really hard to make a phone look completely unique. It's like, plagiarism, writing a term paper. You can change a lot of the sentences, you can change some of the words, but if the structure is the same, similarity detection will catch it. So
yeah, that's interesting. Did you all name that? So back in the early 2000s, PayPal had a really similar situation. Matt knows this, but Maria, I was over at PayPal in the early days, and there was a Russian fraud ring that would basically, buy CD-ROMs, maybe, I don't know if it's the dark web or what, but they would basically get a bunch of credit card information and people and send themselves money, and they would exit it, launder it through the system. And so we had to build the key fraudster there. His name was Igor or something. And we built a visual. yeah, we built this kind of like visualization of all the transactions in our system, and then staffed up a bunch of people who every day would just look at money moving through the system and see unusual patterns. And that this Igor system was the kernel that eventually became Palantir.
Palantir, yeah. It
Yeah,
sounds like
but,
sounds like a bad TV show where the character has a wall with like string and pictures.
Yeah, totally.
It's
totally.
like Homeland. She's
totally
Claire
like
Danes is put on. Yeah.
But it just started with like 3 people, you know, staring at a screen, staring at like Igor version 1.0, like trying to figure out like if you could, because otherwise, like literally you could get someone's credit card number, like, you know, you're a waiter at a restaurant, you could send yourself money using their credit card, and exit the money, and no one, you know, like, and it would be gone. And what was interesting is, at the time at PayPal, one of the people working there was an undercover FBI agent. We later learned.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I wonder if Branch, you know,
you heard it here first, folks.
You know, of those 40 people that you hired, Maria, like maybe someone's kind of undercover, you know? I mean, it's a way of understanding financial fraud is to work in one of these organizations doing pioneering work. You know, and kind of figuring out like how does it work from the inside out, and what does a company like Branch, or, you know, back in the day, what does PayPal do to kind of combat you know, terrorist finance, et cetera, et cetera.
Premal, how did you find out? Like, that sounds like such a cool story.
It was so interesting. We found, I mean, this is a really great, you know, not confirmed, but you know, no one, as PayPal was growing, no one's going to leave like mysteriously. And this woman came in, worked on our fraud team, was kind of looking at the Igor stuff, really capable, just an incredible person. And then just mysteriously like announced that she's leaving. And then I think and she, you know, very closed, like, you know, it was a pretty social crew back then. Like, I'm sure, Maria, like, you knew everyone in the office, you all went out afterwards. She kind of kept her distance. And then through someone, we learned that she was actually employed by the FBI.
Ooh.
So was she,
did
the management?
Why would you come in, rotate through for like 8 months, and then kind of rotate out? Like, you know, it was an unusual story. So anyways, but, you know, glad we passed that test, I guess.
Do you think the CEO and the board knew, like, they were in on it? Or
no,
like
no,
she got hired through the normal.
She got hired.
Yeah.
You know, she probably had incredible credentials around, you know, financial services, fraud, et cetera, et cetera. It was the best candidate in the pile. There's probably other candidates who applied, but what a great way. You know, you hear competitors kind of having roles in other companies, but that was the first time I realized that, you know, why wouldn't a government do that? Not a bad idea.
I find it surprising that Maria just all of a sudden left and got a scholarship at Oxford. And I don't know. I think,
who are you?
It's like
let's start this thing over. I mean, the thing, Maria, that I find really cool. You're a computer science major, right?
Yes, I am. I did that for one.
So what motivated that for you?
So my childhood was a lot of me, like, and I was born in the 90s, right? So I was born in the period where in Nigeria, at the very least, the desktop started, you know, like showing up. MS, you know, 95 started showing up, and my dad was an accountant, so there was always a computer at home. I was very drawn to it. And my dad could see that. I would open it. We had dial-ups at home. I would try to configure it. I was the computer girl in the house. If there was anything wrong with it, my dad would say, go check it out. I had also even learned to touch type on the computer at that time. Like when I was like 9, I was touch typing at like 45 words per minute. Like I was just drawn to the computer. And, you know, in Nigeria, my dad was like, clearly, you know, as an undergrad, computer science seems the logical choice. Like you like computers, you know, that, you know, linear, you know, line. And I did computer science, and it was exciting. It was enough of a challenge to keep me like really motivated and switched on. And it was interesting because it actually is the foundation of how I think today. Although I don't code as much, I actually think in a very structured way. And sometimes it gives me, connections and patterns and parallels that are just come naturally, to me. But the interesting thing was, after I graduated, I did think that I would try to go into software engineering because my friends too were doing that. But I quickly realized how much I actually didn't enjoy it. And I know this is not the politically correct thing to say, but
I thought you loved computers.
I did. And now that has kind of like, now one philosophy in my life is, if you think you like a thing, try it before you like commit to it. So that's like my philosophy now, because sometimes, in our heads, we think we would love something because it's just logical. And it's not that I don't love computers. I think when I kind of dug into it, the thing with software engineering was, it was kind of like it was very deep, but not very wide. I thrive in solving multiple deep problems. I'm a chartered accountant. I self-studied to do that. I liked that depth, but I also don't want to just be a chartered accountant. I also want to do this. So that restlessness, I think software engineering didn't account for it. Thank you so much, guys, for inviting me. I really had fun, and thank you for thinking of me.